normally when somebody's got a Prohibition bottle, they probably they find a case,
right,
a wooden crate of it and shit. So there's always like 24 packs of those or whatever. It's not as rare, and you know what? It's not as good.
This particular episode is a fantastic one. So much so that there's an additional 16 minutes of extra recording that I've added in towards the very end. You'll learn what it takes to be an epic bourbon hunter and listen to the incredible stories our guest has to tell. Once you hear the closing music, it's not over, so stay around towards the end. There won't be a podcast release next week since I'll be traveling out of the country for work, so I hope this bonus content keeps you occupied until then. As always, remember to support the show on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof, and the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select $2 at checkout. And if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast. Kenny and Ryan here, and this is a pretty special week because we are in Ryan's hometown. We're here in Bardstown for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and by doing all this, we saw a lot of big names popping up on the calendar of events, and I took it upon myself. I said, I'm just going to start emailing people and see who responds back, right? Because we've got so many icons in the industry that are coming here today, and this is one hell of a festival.
Yeah, Bardstown Bourbon Fest, I've grown up around it, kind of took it for granted when I was a kid. It's just like, oh, another weekend. But now, it's become huge and it's tons of cool events. We're going to one tonight called Whiskey Pig. Our guest is going to be a part of it, but really excited to talk to him and hear his story. I'd say most people probably know who he is, but it's Bill Thomas from Jack Rose's. He he's a big whiskey collector, has one of the best bourbon bars, in the country, and I'm excited to hear his story.
I think it might rival the world, maybe not just the country, but maybe the world. And we'll definitely want to talk about that a little bit more. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest. So Bill Thomas, the owner of Jack Rose, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thank you for asking me.
So let's learn a little bit more about you first, right? So kind of talk about your history and how you either got into the dining saloon business or had a love affair with bourbon and whiskey. Kind of give us your history.
Well, I first got in the bar business back in the 90s. And during that period when we had the first bar open, we kind of wanted to create an American concept. And we were sitting around one day and we were shooting ideas, and we all realized that we were all drinking bourbon. There was 5 of us sitting in a room, and it was all different bourbons. And that just seems like the perfect umbrella for everything American.
Right. So how did the idea about Jack Rose come about, or were there other things that you owned prior to that? Like kind of give us some more in-depth pieces to it.
Jack Rose came about because we needed shelf space. we had 2 whiskey bars named Bourbon, and they weren't big enough to house what we were doing. I mean, once you start diving into bourbon, you realize how many hundreds and thousands of expressions have been distilled over the last 120 years, really. And trying to focus on a place where you could have all of those bottles front and center for everyone to geek out over. And we're so geeky. I mean, we knew it was not only going to be, people love seeing the bottles, they love drinking the bottles. So the way we designed it was you can see every label from 3 or 4 feet away at the most. You can request any bottle to be brought to the table. And when you actually order a whiskey, the bottle comes with it. So we wanted a place where absolutely everyone could geek out over bourbon, kind of commiserate. It's not, there's a lot of places out there that open up and call themselves a whiskey bar because they order a bunch of bottles. But if there's not people in there, like the person sitting next to you, when you order that bottle and it comes to you, that you can commiserate, they're like, oh, you're drinking the Noah's Mill 15. I remember when I used to drink that. If you don't have that kind of camaraderie sitting at your bar, then you're not a whiskey bar. You're just a place with a bunch of whiskey. It's really about the people that show up that make it an actual whiskey bar.
So before we dive into it, I might have jumped the gun a little bit. Kind of talk about how you got into bourbon. Like, how did you get into bourbon? Was it one day you just kind of...
What was the magic bottle that you're like, oh, this is it?
I started off like everybody else. I mean, you start off... drinking some of the old stuff. I mean, honestly, probably when I first started drinking whiskey, blends still ruled the world. And then you realize you're drinking these blended scotches, and then somehow you grab that first bourbon.
You're like, this is way better.
This is way better. I mean, not that I don't drink blends, and anybody out there that loves blends, but in comparison, blends can't stand up to it. And single malts have been around, but when you get a bourbon, that big lush mouthfeel, you get those old Foresters, those big brown sugar bombs, cinnamon bombs from back in the 80s and 70s, and you're like, wait a minute, this is amazing. And then it was right there at the beginning when, say, Almerty Lee and the Blantons were coming out and all that, and you realize that people are putting out some really amazing products, and you just go one to the next. You start off like everyone else. You're Almerty Lee, you're Blantons, then you got Booker's coming out, then you finally have Stag coming out in 2002, and you're just off to the races at that point. I mean, they're just creating so much great stuff, a lot of cash rank stuff. You just can't help but keep going one to the next. I mean, you just find out that there's 1,000 bottles that you can drink, and each one is completely different.
Oh, awesome.
So when you first started, did you make the natural progression like we always do, start mixing with Coke and then water and then, to neat and then barrel proof?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we always say there's no wrong way to drink whiskey, just drink whiskey. And in our business, we're hospitality. And we just want you to enjoy it the way you want to enjoy it. Now, we will obviously make suggestions if you order a great whiskey. Maybe we'll say, hey, just try it. We bring you a little eyedropper if you want to drop one drop of distilled water in there. But if you just feel like having bourbon and ginger, which is a classic combo, and I think they're amazing, I'll drink it. Or if you want a great whiskey, Turkey 101 is great for Manhattan. Just drink whiskey. That's how we feel. When I was growing up, my family's been in the restaurant business since the turn of the century. We opened up our first Irish bar in D.C. Right around the turn of the century, and it one of the things that really with bourbon, it's kind of the history of America. But when I looked at one of our locations, which is owned by somebody else now, but I looked and I said, wow, that's been an operating restaurant and bar now for over 100 years. So I wanted to do something that we could then have for over 100 years. So one of the reasons of building the inventory for Jack is to have people to have the expressions that they had when they were 20 and now they're 50 and they're still coming back to the same bar. Excuse me, 21. That's good.
Right.
Well, it might have been 18 back then, right? Yeah.
When I was growing up, DC was 18.
Yeah.
So we were hitting bars. I mean, unfortunately, I was in bars when I was like, my first bar was like 15. Because you know how like everything else, you know, you can find the bars now they're 21, they let in 18. Back then when you were at 18, they found bars that would let in 15-year-olds. It was weird to be standing around a bar and seeing some of your classmates at 15.
Yeah, an ID like McGlovin, you know.
You know what?
From Hawaii. From Hawaii.
It was way better than that and way easier to get IDs back then. So I don't even want to say how easy
Don't try to age yourself there.
I don't age myself, but well, if the drinking age was 18, I pretty much aged myself right there.
Right.
So
so I guess one thing we did forget to mention is location of Jack Rose, right? Because people that are maybe they're right now they're on their phone trying to Google it, even trying to figure out like where is this magical place that we've never heard about, right? So kind of give it some ideas of where you can find it.
Just to give you a historical reference, go to the place where Reagan was shot and walk a block, and that's pretty much we're right by the Washington Hilton, which is in the DuPont Circle, Adams Morgan area. So it's right in the center of the city. We're about a mile from the White House. It's an easy walk to the White House from where we are. So what's also great about Jack's placement and is the fact that it is in the center of the city. It's an international city, so you get people from all over the world coming to drink there. So it allows us the ability to carry a lot of stuff that we otherwise couldn't because you have this great density of interesting whiskey people from all over the country. I just had these great guys in from Australia who I met here 2 years ago. They were here for Bourbon Fest, and I met them. They flew in. Their first stop here was coming to DC, and they spent 4 nights in a row at Jack Rose, just drinking through all the stuff that they couldn't get in Australia. And then they were heading here next.
That's awesome.
So it's awesome. I mean, that's Jack Rose is a little bit of a mecca, but it's really about, like I said, now I get to hang out with people from Australia, and it's just such a collaboration of people coming through and just, you know, telling us about what they're doing there or whiskeys they make in Tasmania. So it's great, but their bourbon is still their love. I mean, at the end of the day, bourbon has just traveled all around the world, and it really turns people into making, you know, being great whiskey lovers. And in turn, then it inspires people to open up distilleries to kind of copy what we're doing. Like I'm a Kentuckian now. I never thought Kentucky would be the most important state in the union to me.
You probably spent enough here where
I don't know. I spend actually almost I'd say 2 months out of the year now in Kentucky, which is a lot to spend outside of where you live.
So talk a little bit more, because I want to be able to say that I think it's without a doubt that a lot of bourbon bars across the country, they should be able to aspire to what is Jack Rose and their whiskey selection, everything like that. So kind of off the top of your head, I'm sure that the number's changing by the minute, but how many bottles of whiskey and bourbon do you guys have in inventory?
We try to maintain, different expressions at one time. We try to maintain at least 2,700, which is where we are now. We keep trying to grow, but one of the things that stop us from growing is the fact that there's so many great whiskey drinkers out there, and it's impossible. I mean, we're selling about 10,000 bottles a year now of whiskey. So sourcing that many whiskeys is very difficult. So and growing the list. But what's more important, who cares about growing a list? That's not what counts. It's about keep revolving the list. So if you come in this week or this month, there could be 30 new whiskeys that are like great iconic whiskeys that you never got to try. So having a stagnant list means nothing. It's finding every gem I can out there and having people to be able to come in every day, every week, every month, or the one time they come to DC in the year and they have all these new whiskeys that they've read about, they've heard about, new releases, old releases, and being able to like just introduce them to something that they've always wanted to try. And that's what I think is amazing. It's not about the numbers. You can have 200 great revolving whiskeys. That's what counts. It's about the whiskeys you do have. I was just at the Harrison Smith House this morning, and I looked, they got 60 whiskeys, and I looked at that shelf, and I was like, man, I would be totally happy to drink here for the next week.
Yeah.
You got 20 Willetts on the shelf. You got Wild Turkey 17, the Wild Turkey 1998. You got some, Elijah Craig 12, cask strength hidden in the back. I mean, there's just such great whiskeys. So it's really about having great whiskeys as opposed to having like thousands. But besides that, let me answer, we do have another 6,000 bottles in storage on top of the 2,700 different expressions, plus another 1,000, 1,500 backups ready to replace them. So, we just keep building and keep buying collections. I just bought whiskey right before you guys got here. So
without giving out all your secrets, because I'm sure you want to hoard all these bottles yourself,
right? But
because it's getting definitely more competitive, to get these bottles. Yeah. So talk about where you are sourcing these bottles and kind of just, and how difficult it has become.
It's It's definitely more competitive and difficult to get bottles, and the pricing keeps going up. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of great whiskeys now that are getting higher and higher simply because people are collecting. First of all, whiskey's meant to be drunk. So if you're staring at that bottle on your shelf right now, you should drink it, because it will go bad over time.
Or call you.
Call me.
Yeah.
You know what? You can call me. I'll buy it, and then I'll have 50 people.
He'll sell
try
it for a profit.
Yeah. Yeah, I will. That's good. But we try to keep the prices at a reasonable level. I mean, the point is you want people to be able to afford to drink whiskey, and kind of our mission right now. And recently, I mean, you just wake up one day and you realize, man, this is not over. This is going to keep going for years. Whiskey is on fire. It's never going to go back to the way it was in the 70s when it fell out of fashion. We're looking at global expansion of the product. We're looking at more and more people in the U.S. You're looking at a diversity, the amount of people that are drinking. It's not just, a typical drinker probably would be a white male at one point. Now it's all over the map. We have just as many women. We have different ethnic groups, different countries. I mean, everybody's into bourbon. And that's just going to keep the demand going higher and higher and the prices going higher and higher. So the mission is to buy everything you get your hands on now so you can have a reasonable priced inventory 20 years from now.
So the days I read a little thing in the Washington Post about you found 9 bottles of Pappy for $130 or something. The days of that are long gone.
Days of that. I tell you what, when the old Rip Van Winkle 15, which is now what as Pappy 15, back in the early 2000s when they discontinued that squat bottle 15, I was picking them up here in Bardstown and throughout Kentucky for like $22. In one place it was in a dump bin. They were just clearance. Let's get rid of this. And we bought a ton of that up. We were lucky enough to pull that. When I look back at my original whiskey lists back from the early 2000s, that was $9 for 2 ounces on Old Rip Van Winkle 15. And those of you who are listening, you're all whiskey heads. You know that's like you're probably right now going, God damn, that's like crazy. So it's amazing. But watching, trying to source whiskey. I mean, obviously we have a reputation for buying. We're fair. If you call me up, I'll try and give you a fair price. And anyone who tries, and there's guys out there that try and kind of, I don't want to say rip people off, but they send you these lowball offers. And I'm like, don't they know that Google is just like one click away? I mean, you do this thinking you're going to try and steal this bottle from someone. The best thing is put your best foot forward, give them a fair price on it and buy it. So we get a lot of referrals. Somebody finds a bottle, then their friend finds a bottle or 5 bottles in their basement, and we get a phone call. So that's one great way. That's one way we still have a leg up on finding bottles that other people can't get. It's just because of our reputation in the market. Obviously, there's auction sites. I mean, you have the major auctions. Obviously, we all know Sotheby's and Christie's and stuff like that. They have auctions, but there's other smaller auction sites that you buy whiskey. Germany, Japan,
eBay, overseas, all those different things.
I just for my personal collection, I just got a bottle from Hong Kong the other day, and it was a chore to get it out of Hong Kong and get it here. We do it. So we're just sourcing from anywhere and just anybody who's got a list. Unfortunately, a lot of whiskey turns over when a family member passes away and collections go up for sale. But I'm sure that person, ultimately appreciates that the whiskeys are getting out there and getting drunk. I mean, obviously it was their passion, their love. So that's just going on to a new group of people. It's their passion. And that's what's great.
I think a good question to ask even before, because we talked about sourcing these things and being able to bring them into the store. But there might be some owners out there that are kind of wondering, like, how the hell are they able to do this? So kind of explain the laws in DC and how you have that advantage.
Because I live in the best city in the world. I live in the only federal city in the United States. And that means that, if you and a group of friends get together and you buy a barrel of whiskey somewhere and get a label made for it, it has to have federal label approval. And since we're a federal city, we only have federal label approval. There's no county or state. So once that's done, you get federal label approval. I can buy whiskey from anywhere in the United States. Any bottle that's ever been made has had federal label approval. I buy that, I fill out an application form, I pay an additional tax, it's on my shelf the next day. So whiskeys that I'm buying right now to here today, when I leave this podcast, I will go buy whiskey and it'll be on the shelf on Monday when I get back at Jack. I camped out at Heaven Hill the other night. You asked me how I get whiskey? I put in the legwork. I went and camped out at Heaven Hill to get one of 25 bottle releases. I mean, it's not like it's I've got this magic of finding bottles. I just put in the legwork and I hustle. And we do what it takes to make sure that we get bottles. Because when people come to Jack Rose, they expect we're going to have it. The newest releases and the old vintages. So it takes a lot of legwork, a lot of time, and a lot of hustle. but I like the hustle. So
what's easier to get now? The newer releases or those older vintages?
The older vintages to me are easier to get. They're more costly. Obviously, they're a lot more expensive, but getting this year's B-Tax, I mean, obviously the Sazerac, I think, has a really low yield, but the William Laroux Weller has 40% more yield this year, which is going to be great for all of us, except for the fact that there's expanding markets and more people are drinking it. So even though there's, more, we probably still will have the same access or less than we had last year. But that's great. I mean, I want more people to drink whiskey. That's why we open whiskey bars. So I can't then say, I'm sad that I can't get as much. More people are drinking whiskey. I just want you to make more. That's all.
Be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm sure you have your regular patrons that come and, have a drink after work or anything like that. Are a lot of the regular patrons, are those the ones that are wanting to explore a lot of older things? Or are they more or less wanting to get a chance to try all the newer things? What do you kind of see as a lot of the target of the people that come in there that are your kind of regular customers? Are they're really going for?
Whether it's they learn it through a podcast, whether they learn it through a website, Whiskey Magazine, Whiskey Advocate, they keep on top of what's coming out new release wise. So they always want to try the new releases, but they generally would come in and ask the staff, what vintage bottle did you get? Just pour us what you think the best is. So there's a lot of trust that's been built up between the regular that come in and the staff. They know that we can't even keep up with the whiskey book because stuff's coming in every day. So the whiskey book, there could be 200 expressions that aren't on the book that have come in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. So when you have that kind of repeat business, you have to kind of build a rapport with the staff. They know what you're drinking, if you're a bourbon guy, if you're a Scotch guy. But it's that kind of interaction between the staff and the customer that keeps, I think, Jack successful. Just having those bottles, new and old.
So out of the 6,000 bottle, plus bottles you have, there has to be a few that have just like stood out and you're like, oh man, I don't want to drink. I want to drink this, but I don't want to drink it because I don't want it to end, this bottle to end.
You know what? Somebody asked me one time, what's the one bottle in all the bottles you have that you wouldn't drink? And I was like, you know what? It's not a matter of would or I wouldn't drink it. It's with who I would drink it. So most of the rare bottles that get opened at my house are when there's 6 whiskey guys that come over, and that's who you want to share it with. So, whether it's a 1950s old Fitzgerald, I'm a big fan of the old Brown-Forman stuff. Obviously, that's taken a big jump, all the ND, the Taylors. But, bottles are just meant to be drunk, and I think it's just the company that you want to drink them with. And,
sure.
Obviously we're, there's been times when Jack Rose has been extremely, extremely busy and whiskey guys have come in. I'm like, we're so busy that I actually walk down to my house and we drink. I'm sometimes the worst businessman. I take all these whiskey people that want to buy whiskey. I take them down to my house and we drink expensive whiskey for free. It's like, it was the worst. I always tell the story when we opened up the first bourbon bar, nobody was really into whiskey. It's exploded now, especially the last 5 years. I mean, we're talking exponential growth. But if you go back 10 years or 12 years, nobody really cared. Somebody would walk in and be like, hey, what's that bottle up there? I'd be like, what, for that bottle? Before you know it, I'd be sitting on the other side of the bar with them, and then I'd be copying the whole check just to have someone to talk to. This is like, at least now I'm making some money on it. But
it's definitely, it's amazing how bourbon creates that connection between people. You can, like you said, just sit around with a group of people, have a bottle, and you can like all connect with it, just, sitting around enjoying it.
Yeah, if this was in here, we're all drinking Johnny Drum 12-year-old now. And if you know that bottle,
thanks, Drew.
It's a dinosaur. Yeah, Drew Colesveen was nice to not only bottle this, but get me a bottle the other day.
The last time I had this was way before it was even cool, and I didn't even know it was cool. So
yeah, but you drink this and it's amazing.
Oh, it's incredible.
Just drinking with good people. You can travel the country now. Once you start getting into the whiskey with whiskey people, you can pretty much couch surf your way across the United States. They're happy to have you, and they're happy to share their collections. I mean, there's people staying at my house right now. I'm out of town. They're at home, and I'm like, drink what you want, I left a key for them. And that happens all the time. We have whiskey people that stay at the house, and happy to have them. The only problem is washing all the glasses.
Right. I was about to say, I think we could create a new category in like Airbnb of whiskey or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that whole talk of camaraderie, I think it kind of brought up a pretty good question in my mind. So I'm going to point this to you, Bill. So if you were to share a drink with one person, past, present, or possibly even fiction, who would it be? It could be idols, it could be whoever. It could be, Hulk Hogan. It could be whoever.
You know what? If I could share whiskey, unfortunately, before there were whiskey, it would be my dad. He passed away prior to us really exploding in the whiskey scene, and I would love to have a whiskey with him. Other than that, probably Abraham Lincoln.
Nice. Not us.
There's a there's a favorite quote from Lincoln. He said, "Good things comes to those who wait, but only those things left from those who hustle." And being a bit of a hustler, I love that quote. I just love the fact that Lincoln used the word hustle. So I think that guy would be a good guy to drink with. So.
Awesome. Yeah, to be in the bourbon game, you got to be a hustler. That's for sure. I'm too lazy now these days.
I tell you what, I think the guys who are sourcing whiskey, I mean, it takes a lot of effort, out there to find these bottles. But you really got to be, the old dusty hunters. Obviously, the guys are out there looking at liquor stores. Obviously, that's a tough game now because there's been so many. The explosion over the last, especially 5 years, that most shelves are gone. There's no dusty. Although I was here in Kentucky going to buy a collection, and we put in the wrong address in the GPS and went 2 hours out of our way, and we hit an old liquor store. This was in Kentucky. This was 6 weeks ago. I walked in. I picked up an old Rip 10, a Pogue Master Select, and the new Booker's Rye. And I was like, "This is crazy! Yeah. I can't believe I'm finding even this stuff sitting on a shelf."
I'm kind of mad, to be honest with you.
It is. It's crazy, right? Every time you think it's over. A new store owner buys a store, cleans out the back room. I always tell people, if the old days of going to a liquor store, looking at the shelves and saying, "Oh, there's an old bottle there. Let me get that. Can I see that?" Really, then it got to the point where, and I'm talking to all the dusty guys out there, and they know what to do, and that's getting back in the office and finding those bottles that are holding up their books, on the shelf that they thought it was a cool looking bottle, so it's been sitting there for 20 years. I mean, you got to get in the back rooms, you got to get behind the bulletproof glass. All the dusty guys know the tricks. You got to look like you wouldn't harm a fly. It's kind of hard to say, "Hey, you got bulletproof glass.
Go behind the lottery.
Can I get back there?"
Yeah.
And then they have to ask them for a ladder because you want to get up and see. It's crazy, but dusty guys are pretty persistent.
So you're talking about doing all these different collections, and you have your own personal stash as well. And you were here in Bardstown camping out, getting the new Parker's Heritage and the new William Heaven Hill. Now, how do you decide what goes to the business versus what goes to your personal stash? Or is it just kind of a gray area all in general?
Every whiskey that I have is either going to be drunk at my house or at the bar. I mean, it's all there for whatever we need. I mean, I look at it as kind of just a ever-changing warehouse for the bar. It's great. I like looking at bottles as much as the next guy, but I want to keep the products flowing into Jack. So it's just It's funny. Jack pays me. I go buy whiskey. Then Jack buys the whiskey. The money just goes. It just keeps going in a circle. So there's nothing. I mean, it's all going to be at Jack or one of the. We've got another whiskey bar opening up in about 10 months. So we're going to need opening inventory, a couple thousand bottles there. So everything's ready to get out there.
So at the very beginning, before we started recording this, you talked about doing private barrel picks. You talked about finding some of those barrels that even Ryan said, the ones that maybe be leaking a little bit. Kind of share a lot of some of these theories that you said you have on from private barrel picks, and how do you go about convincing the master distiller to say, "No, I want that barrel."
I mean, obviously, when we first started doing barrel picks, it was back in the day when there was a lot of whiskey to be purchased, and they were open to it. I mean, obviously now some people have barrel programs. It's pretty static, but in the old days, walking into the distillery and just being like, "Hey, can we buy some barrels?" They're like, "Yeah, that's great." You might even get taken out to dinner. Now you walk in, they're like, "We'll schedule in for a time. Maybe we'll sell you a barrel."
It's you again, damn it.
Yeah. In fact, back in the day, though, I will say this. I tried to buy barrels from Heaven Hills for years, and every year they would take me into the boardroom, sit me down, and they would come up with a new polite way to say no. They were the great Max and Harry. It's weird sitting with and Harry, who we lost last year, obviously, or has it been 2 years now? Time flies. But my favorite story about Harry is they took me back in the room, and it's Max and it's Harry, and they're sitting there, and I'm like, "Hey, can I buy some barrels?" And every year I'd be like, this year I'm going to say I'll take 100. Whatever. I just kept up in the game. And they'd be like, "You know what? No, but you can use some of our logo licensing and this and that." And every year, and then one year they gave me a big tub full of T-shirts, coffee, everything swag. They're like, "We just can't do it this year. Maybe next year." And so I'm hauling this big tub out to my car of all the stuff they gave me in the polite way they said no. And Harry Shapiro comes running out to the car. He goes, "Hey, I need my tub back." They're good businessmen. They make a lot of great whiskey. The great thing about them, just to be fair, is they I did an article the other day and they asked me some of the best values on the market, and they've been really good about keeping some of the prices down. The McKenna 10, I mean, one of the best, Larceny, the Elijah Craig 12-year cash strength, I think is one of the best affordable whiskeys out there. So, they're pretty shrewd business guys, but they deliver a lot of great whiskey at an affordable price for the drinker, which is still great. A lot of places don't. It's hard to get your hands on stuff.
They say they can always squeeze like a dime out of a penny. Is the saying about them?
Yeah,
yeah.
They do a good job, but they make good whiskey. So,
yeah, for sure.
Think about, and I think for a lot of us, especially early on, Mike Miller at Delilah's in Chicago, myself, Linnell, who had Red Hook, the liquor store, we were all big barrel people. And we'd see each other. Tatsumi at Rogan's in Japan. On a given day, you'd be at, and I think one of the kind of the linchpins for those of us who were trying to take whiskey and get better whiskey for everyone to drink was barrel picks. And there was one epicenter for barrel picks, and probably still is Willetts Distillery. I mean, going and doing Willetts barrel picks, I would show up on a given day, and I'd be walking with Mike Miller to pick stuff for Chicago, or Tatsumi would be there from Japan. And it was like crazy. It became this epicenter of whiskey people just meeting and buying barrels and taking them back to their home states or across the seas to Japan. I mean, it's amazing whiskey. And I always look at barrel picks as, most of us do them at cash strength. So you get to see the whiskey right from the barrel, right to the bottle. You get to see all the great kind of nuances of the whiskey. I think it's the one key thing that keeps anybody who's into whiskey. And I find barrel picks bring Scotch people over to bourbon. Scotch is a really complex spirit, and I feel it. Nothing is barrel picks or cash strength whiskey kind of can match up with any of the best single malts. It's a great bridge that brings people over. But barrel picks probably kept me energized. It's not just sourcing what's coming out; it's going there. And I always think of a barrel pick as saving it from a blend, or saving it
right.
from being it was a service that I did. And I think that Drew offering that program for so many years really helped kind of push the whiskey market in a direction that a lot of people then picked up on. All of a sudden, you saw more places releasing cash strength whiskeys, giving you access. So I think for me, there's certain kind of milestones, opening up your first bar and buying everything, which back in the day, and I would actually call one of the first guys I ever met was Drew, and then Guthrie at Toddy's.
Yep.
Which to me is like one of the most iconic places here in Bardstown. But I would literally, the first time I walked into a store, because in DC back then when we first opened, there was like 40 whiskeys available. Then you come here to Kentucky, the epicenter, you come to Bardstown, I looked at his shelf and I was like, I don't have that. Before you know it, I'm picking up another 40, 50 bottles. And then I took them back and we'd blow through them. And then I was calling him and being like, I need 20 cases of Yellow Label, Four Roses, 20 cases of Single Barrel, 20 cases of McKenna, 20 cases of Old Heaven Hill Bond. And I would literally get off the plane, grab a U-Haul, drive to Toddy's. He'd have it waiting outside for me. I load up 150 cases of booze.
This is Guthrie? Yeah, nice.
He would have it ready for me, and I would haul it back to DC, and that's what we kind of lived on. We, before Four Roses, when it first became available, it was only available here. And then it, hit a couple states. Now it's obviously widely available. But if you didn't come to Kentucky back in the day, in the 2000s, your access to whiskey was almost nothing. So you had to be here. And anybody who missed those great days of coming to Kentucky.
And now it's reversed. We can't get shit.
It's everywhere. It's amazing. It's, no one can. I mean, obviously everyone across the country now is complaining about access, which is even more important for me to obviously get out there and talk to people, trade. Obviously I'd much rather trade than buy. If anybody's listening, find me today.
Yeah.
I'll trade
Twitter handle. Yeah.
If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon.
I guess that's a good question to bring up as well, because you have this connection with Drew. You've known him for a lot of years. You've got a crazy amount of Willetts at your establishment. How did you actually get connected with Drew in the very beginning? Was it just a phone call, or was it somebody else introducing you?
Obviously there was one guy who's kind of the grandfather of barrel picks, hands down, and that's Doug Phillips. So I don't know if you guys know Doug, but he was the first one to reach out and do that 22-year-old rye, and that's what sparked this whole revolution of barrel picks. So, a friend of mine knew Doug, and I was like, well, that's a great idea. So let's go down and visit Drew. Let's go meet this guy. I think it was like a week before I was like, let's get on a plane and go see where to find out. And I met Drew, and I don't think he was married to Janelle yet, but here he is. We're at dinner, and I was like, I like to buy barrels. We're like, yeah, great, let's do this. It was like instantaneous.
I got barrels to sell.
And then I got back to DC, and I said, okay, I just bought 3 barrels of whiskey. That's a lot of whiskey for one thing. And I was like, what are we going to do with this? So my family started a distribution company. And so that's what's great about all those barrel picks is we used part of it for the bar, but the rest went out to every other bar and restaurant. And I think that's why DC scene kind of developed the way it is. And it's obviously a huge whiskey drinking town, but it's really a town that is big into Willetts, big into barrel picks, because we got them out to every bar and restaurant. We got them out to liquor stores. So part of every barrel was always going out to the public. And that's what I think just helped kind of build in DC. And we were, laying out that money back then. It was all the money in the world to buy a barrel, and those barrels right now, if I told you how much they cost, you'd be like,
you'd laugh. Yeah.
Those barrels were the price of one single bottle of a vintage whiskey now.
Yeah.
It was crazy to think of what the pricing was. And obviously we'd look for special barrels. We'd go into the brick house and we'd be like, the one over there with all the bird shit on it, let's do that. And my theory was anybody else who was doing barrel picks maybe was too lazy to want to put their hands on a dirty barrel, so we'd pick those barrels. When we first started barrel picks too, you didn't buy it by the bottle like you do today. You'd buy it by the barrel. So you'd taste a barrel if you liked it. You give it a shake. You'd be like, that one's pretty full. I'll take this barrel. So that's how we started. But then you started to learn barrel picks. We started to do some barrel picks where they were light barrels. And all of a sudden, every time we tried one of these barrels, it was like half full that it, had a leak that was plugged at some point. The whiskey seemed to be really, really good. So then we started looking for barrels that were half filled all the time. We did one called Tobacco Road. Trying to think, one of the last barrel picks we did was Boardwalk, and they some of them yielded 40 bottles. Some yielded like maybe 80 when they should be yielding 160. And we always found that when we tried these barrels, they were just absolutely amazing. So that became a thing. And I recently started buying barrels of new make from all these different distilleries and having them stored at a distillery here in Kentucky. And I had them fill barrels partial way.
I was about to say,
I'm trying to recreate the magic.
Are you going through and then just like poking holes in them? Like,
it upped the cost. It's going to up the cost. We won't know for 5 years, 6 years whether it worked or not. But you know what? I plan to be in. We built Jack Rose. I keep saying that. If my kids wouldn't be interested, well, when I have kids, if they're not interested in running Jack Rose, then hopefully someone from the staff. Or someone's kid from the staff who's been working with us.
You can call me.
It'll be a meritocracy. I want to do a meritocracy. If you're into whiskey, then you get to run the show. So, we're trying to build an inventory and stockpile enough inventory for 100 years right now. And I I thought about it the other day. I was like, oh, the 50th anniversary, that'd be great. And I was like, wait a minute, I won't be here for the 50th anniversary of this bar. But somebody will be. And they'll be drinking great Willetts, and they'll be drinking, great whiskey from all the distilleries. So I'm pretty geeked out thinking that, the kind of the legacy is for the whiskey drinker.
I'll ask a question about your barrel picks, because we see a lot of barrel picks come out from Willett, and they've got these kind of crazy names. You talked about yours, Boardwalk. You got Doug Green Ink. You got Red Hook Rye. You've got all these things that have been out there. How do those names come to you?
Well, it's funny because, like, obviously, Doug's Green Ink is because it was for Doug Phillips on the back. It's just written in green ink. So the kind of the society of whiskey drinkers out there kind of dubbed it. Red Hook came out because her liquor store was in Red Hook, so it was a Red Hook Rye. We from day one started giving them names based on a feeling or something. We, in many ways, it's right after the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society in Scotland. They give things a name. It evokes an emotion. Like it reminds you of, one whiskey that they did put out was one called Cannabis, Limes, and Chocolate. That's pretty clear what you're getting out of that whiskey. But we would name whiskeys, based on if when we all drank it, if it had, like, we did one called Double Bean because it was it reminded me of like coffee beans and smoky beans and stuff like that. So we Double Bean. We did one called Time Out, because we found that this particular whiskey was really tight right out of the bottle. But if you gave it 30 minutes in a glass, it completely changed. So we named it Time Out to tell people, hey, take a break. In fact, we always recommend that you get another whiskey and then get that whiskey at the same time and let it sit for 30 minutes. So we wanted to pick a name that reminded people to do that. So Time Out. The Velvet Glove and Iron Fist were really good. One was a little more subtle than the other. They were 137 and 137.1 proof. So, just having them play against each other. We did one called First in War and First in Peace. We didn't get First in War because the barrel accidentally got dumped before we got it. So we ended up with just First in Peace. But that's it. We just wanted, sometimes Chocolato had a lot of chocolate notes. We did one called Montezuma because it had that kind of dark, unsweetened chocolate note. We did one called Cherry Bomb because it kind of reminded us of Stitzel, and we always thought Stitzel has a little bit of a cherry note to it, so it became Cherry Bomb. Sopressata, a salted ham. You just get this. If you get that kind of flavor from it, you just kind of come up with these names. And we sit around. I'd fly in. I'd buy. I'd get some barrel samples. We'd take them back to a controlled environment because everything tastes great in a rick. When you're in the rick house and you're trying busting open 20 barrels a day, you're looking to kind of get rid of the major flaws. And then you take what you think are your best ones, because ultimately you're going to get palate fatigue even if you're spinning. You take those back to a controlled environment and you try them again. And then you narrow those 20 samples down to, like, say, 3 barrels that you think are just absolutely amazing. So that's what we did. We were very, very conscious of trying to pick the best barrels. And there was times that we flew down and picked barrels and then decided that none of them were good enough, for what we thought. The DC Willets, we just thought they weren't good enough. So we kept kind of just refining that kind of the whiskeys that we thought the other fellow whiskey people really geek out over and really love. So we put a lot of time and effort into each pick. And one day if the barrel program returns, because obviously Willett is so successful. They're producing so much whiskey now, and they, even their regular brands have just gone through the roof that, their focus is there. But, just getting back in the rick house, I was lucky enough to fly in a few weeks ago with Drew, and we picked the whiskeys for tonight. So we went through and we tried, 20 barrels, and we picked 3 barrels that people are going to enjoy tonight. And one's a 23-year-old. I think it's an 8-year-old rye or 10-year-old rye. These are going to be phenomenal whiskeys. And it's just going back to that nostalgia of, like, going in there, cracking open whiskeys and picking the best ones.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to that. So I've got one last question for you so we can wrap it up. And, through this whole podcast, we've been talking to you, and we can tell that your passion is there, right? And you've been doing this for close to almost 2 decades now of hustling and building your bars and making them what they are today, and seeing through the ups and downs of the whiskey industry. Does there ever come a point where you feel like you've gotten burnt out, or do you just, or how do you get over that hump?
No, I never feel burnout about whiskey. I just feel like,
September drinking it, all night, for till 4 a.m.
It gets away from you sometimes. But it's really right now, it's just, is there enough time to build the collection? It's just trying to keep making it better. And once again, really sourcing it at a price that then people can enjoy. So right now, it's the stress always comes in. Do we have enough? can we get enough to keep offering it? And that's the pressure it's on right now. I don't think it's not a burnout of it. I just put a lot of pressure on trying to find, the great whiskeys that are coming out today, which, we look at now is there's a ton of whiskey that gets produced, but which ones are the ones that you're going to want to drink in 5 years? There's a lot of whiskeys. We always say, I'm sure the distillers follow this. It's not getting them to buy the first bottle. It's getting them to buy the second bottle. So my job is to find out which whiskeys come out currently that people are going to want to drink for 5 years. What are the next iconic ones, the ones that we feel are the best? And then also going back and finding more bottles of the ones that we've been drinking over the last 20 years, 30 years, and keeping enough of them that people would be able to come in. But it's, once again, you can't price people out on the market. You got to bring it at a price that people can and try it. Having a bunch of whiskey sitting on a shelf that are overpriced doesn't do anyone any good. You got to bring it out and put it at a price. One thing I'm going to start is a whiskey club at Jack. And one of the things I'm going to offer is every time I find an amazing bottle at a really good price, only the members will be able to at that amazing price. Like if I snag this great bottle that, I find wherever I get an auction, like nobody showed up and I was lucky enough to get a great bottle, but just wanting to share that kind of stuff. So I don't know. That's really the hustle.
How do I sign up?
Yeah. It's going to be crazy. I think I can't wait.
Secret handshake, a card, whatever it is to get me in that club.
I think the next 10 years are going to be amazing. There's a lot of great distilleries out there now that are producing a lot of great stuff. Who's going to be the next? Obviously, Willetts producing a lot of good stuff. Peerless. I don't know if you've been Kentucky Peerless. I think their stuff is going to be top. And then outside of Kentucky, there's some other good guys out there. Sonoma Distilling in California. Are making a lot of good stuff. You got rye being made in Pennsylvania again at Dad's Hat. There's a lot of stuff out there that I can't wait to see how they progress, and being able to source that stuff is going to be the key.
I think they'll be more than happy to have their label on the bar at Jack's Rose.
Yeah.
Rose. Yeah.
It's a lot of the distillers come up. They're really gracious. They take time to visit, and they'll obviously do events and stuff with us. So, I think whiskey, and they're rock stars now, but they're obviously pretty humble. Jimmy Russell's probably been in, a dozen times since we've opened. And he's always been good about, meeting people and photos and sharing information with us. And he'll tell you the truth. If he thinks a whiskey's great, he'll tell you. And if you think a whiskey's bad, having that kind of honesty is important, because obviously when you're spending, $50 on a bottle, buying something that you don't like or don't enjoy is, that's a lot of money to ask people to, and then asking somebody to spend 10 or $20 on a shot, an ounce of whiskey or 2 ounces of whiskey. That's for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. And bourbon's always been, affordable, and it's always been
the
great.
common man's drink, really.
That's right.
It is. You know what? But
not anymore.
And women's. Sorry,
it's far from common on the taste. You're right. It's just crazy. You expect these whiskeys that you tried or you took for granted in high school.
Yep.
Now you're like, damn it, why didn't I savor that? Why did what was I thinking?
I had several though. Well, my dad had several of those back in the day, and I'm like, what the hell was I doing putting Coke with it?
I know. It's crazy when we think back to some of our old drinking habits, but I keep pretty extensive tasting notes. And one of the things I always do with my tasting notes is I write down who was with me in the room. And I love looking back and saying, Harvey and Roberto and myself drank, these bottles on this day. And, just
cool.
It's awesome. And I also, it's funny because a lot of people use the word smooth, right? And in my tasting group, that is verboten. No. You cannot say the word smooth because it doesn't give you any real descriptor. And one time I was writing my tasting notes and I go in my tasting group, I was like, it's smooth. And they just started yelling at me. They're like, how dare you use that word? And I held up thank God I had my tasting book. I held it up and I said, it said smooth and not in a good way. I was like, I can use it as a bad, but I can't use it as good. So, we take it pretty serious. And that also gives you an opportunity to really enjoy each whiskey and kind of break it down, spend 30 minutes with it. So try it with a drop of water, not with a drop of water. Try it. I also find glassware, big difference. You can try a whiskey and then Glencairn, and then you put it in a snifter and it's a completely different whiskey. So I think, that's part of the fun is being able to try to cask strength, add your own water. You basically get the same whiskey at one price, but you get to try it two different ways. And glassware, whether it's a snifter, whether it's, a proprietary glass somebody's developing now, a Riedel or something like that, you can spend your life drinking the same whiskey in different, settings. which is great. But obviously, there's still nothing better than a rick house in the middle of Kentucky. You know,
I think it's awesome.
barrel.
I think it's awesome. You got a grown ass man's journal is what you have right there. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's an easy way to remember exactly not only just the whiskey itself, but the time that you had and what you talked about or anything else, right? So I'm sure there'll be a time you'll look back on it and reminisce or anything like that. But we are wrapping up to the top of the hour here. We know we've gone over, but Bill, I want to say thank you again for being on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, man. That was awesome. Appreciate the time and the whiskey.
Yes.
Let's put us in.
I wish I had a Coke can right now that I could and have people freak out right now that we're going to do something bad with us.
So do we get to make the tasting notes journal?
That's true. I tried.
This is 2 D bags.
This little book is not it. But this is a list of stuff I'm buying.
There you go.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for having me. It's been a great time.
Absolutely. So we'll give one more last plug to Jack Rose, how they can find you, how they can find you online, Twitter, and all those good things.
You can go to jackrosediningsaloon.com. You can call us, obviously. Facebook, you can find us Jack Rose Dining Saloon. We're in Washington, D.C. If you got any whiskey to sell, it's call me on my cell, 202-262-5637, and we'll make a deal. Thanks.
Awesome.
That's a first. There you go. Somebody giving out their phone number, right?
Yeah, cell phone. Call me anytime.
And I believe Twitter's Jack Rose DC. Jack Rose in DC. So there you go. So you can follow them on Twitter. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Bourbon Pursuit, Facebook Bourbon Pursuit, Instagram Bourbon Pursuit. Also support the show if you like what you hear. Patreon.com, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit.
Yep. And any show suggestions, feedback, we always like to hear, suggestions from our fans. So I appreciate you all listening, and we'll see you next time.
The next 16 minutes is bonus audio from sitting around and casually talking to Bill Thomas while drinking Johnny Drum 12 Year. There's even more bonus audio that you can only hear by supporting us on Patreon. This is a labor of love for us, and your pledges help keep us motivated. Plus, you get some pretty cool stuff in return, like bourbon samples, koozies, stickers, and some t-shirts are going to be coming down as well. Patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. So enjoy this bonus audio.
All right,
There we go.
thanks.
Nice job.
Cheers. Oh, good deal. Cheers. Thanks.
Here we
Thanks
go.
for having me. You're out?
You weren't talking, so you just kept drinking, right?
Exactly.
He was enjoying.
That was great. That was awesome.
No, it was awesome.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for taking the time and doing this.
Yeah, there's nothing I enjoy more than talking about whiskey. So
Yeah.
Too.
I mean, people.
I'm not going to say no.
There you go. Exactly.
I can tell.
Probably the only time in my life I'll be able to try this until I come back to make my way to DC.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I drank Johnny Drum 12. You know,
When Drew
I had
said
the
that,
15. I had some 15 at Drew's like a year ago.
15 was one of my all-time favorites, man. Love that one. You know, because we distribute Willett in Washington, D.C., so I was the first salesman there, and Johnny Drum 15, all the vintage rye, 17, 21, like just stacks of cases in the warehouse. And the vintages I couldn't sell to save my life. Nobody wanted the vintage. And we'd have 5 different barrel picks in there. It was amazing back in the day, but it's crazy.
It's hindsight. What are you going to do, right?
Yeah. I was lucky enough that I did do a lot of buying.
Yeah.
So we stockpiled it pretty good.
Then.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the bottles that we still have, I still have original cases of, the cardboard cases half filled of Drum 15
Right.
and stuff. But, which is obviously why we're able to keep the prices down a little bit.
Oh, because you bought them for $4 a bottle back then or something like that?
Yeah. It's crazy. Those old ryes were costing originally wholesale $65 a bottle. Mm-hmm. And now they're $7,000.
Yeah.
I think I paid
When I first started hunting, I went into one liquor store over in Northeast DC and bought probably 2 cases of Rebel Yell just sitting on the shelf, old Stitzel strip seals. Granddad, the funny thing about Granddad 86s, I didn't buy those. I only liked the bond. I would leave the Granddad 86s on the shelf and take all the bonds. I would leave the old Forster 86s, all of that, and I would only take the bonded stuff when I was hunting. That's all I wanted to drink. So
even a couple of years ago too, you were like, that's delicious.
yeah, I know. I'm still I'm a guy. I get a little. And so I was in New York, and Jimmy and I were staying on the same floor and on the elevator. And I said, Jimmy, I saw a bottle. Somebody had sent me a photo of Wild Turkey rye, and then in the back it says Made in Maryland. I was like, is that legit? And he's like, yeah. He goes, back then nobody would drink Kentucky rye. It had to be from Maryland. So I had to source it from Maryland and put Wild Turkey on it.
That's like the Pikesville, right?
Yeah.
It used to be made in Maryland, right?
Yeah.
The Heaven Hill stuff.
Yeah. Pikesville, Baltimore Pure Rye. Mount Vernon rye, but Maryland, Pennsylvania were the rye meccas.
Yeah.
So I finally just got 2 bottles of it. I've been trying to. Somebody wanted to they wanted me to trade a Velvet Glove or an Iron Fist for it.
Yeah, that's a tough
And I was like, that was a tough one. And then a guy called me the other day and he had 4 of them, and he let me buy 2 of them. So I finally got the Wild Turkey rye. So I'm pretty excited. But it's just Baltimore Pure rye in a different package, but still, just the fact that it's Wild Turkey in Maryland to me is like insane.
Because you were born in Maryland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had to have that bottle. That was one of my holy grail bottles for sure. And that other one, I just got that 35 Stitzel. Did you see that?
No.
You seen that?
No.
Where's
Is
that?
that
Here it is.
Oh, it's on your.
It is sickening good. Or no,
That's
I don't know if it's
I
sickening
remember
good.
you.
It's sickening.
I remember somebody saying you were at Whiskey Live. I was actually at Whiskey Live, but I didn't get a chance to meet you. I met Jared when I was there.
Yeah, I was back in a VIP. They had me back in a VIP
That's
room.
right.
That's a
My media
I just picked
credentials
that up
didn't
the
get
other
me
day.
back there. So
It's a 30,
Yeah.
35 to 42.
I was.
I did see that on Instagram. Yeah, that's cool.
That was. I was looking. I didn't know any.
yeah, I was just out in the
awesome.
commoners
I
area.
didn't know any 35s existed.
Jesus Christ.
Because they were only open. Remember, they opened Derby Day 1935. So I said, well, how much did they really produce in that? That was any good? Maybe they dumped. I don't know. Because I had I have 2 36s that I bought at auction years ago. And I was like, well, maybe there's no 35s, so maybe this is the first year Stitzel. And then Sean Brock was over at Julian's house, like about 2 years ago. He was in that, and he goes, that he saw that Julian had a 35. So then I knew they existed,
Right.
which bugged the shit out of me.
And you're because I don't have one.
I have a 35.
I'm gonna find it.
So then I found it, and then
God, you guys are like crazy, like the master baseball card collectors. You guys have like everything.
well, I got
out
about
there.
12,000 cards. If you want them,
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
You want to buy them?
for bourbon.
Yeah. I will trade. Yeah, I want 1 good bottle of bourbon. You can have all 12,000. But
Better be tops.
and then when I posted this, a guy sent me that he had a 35 as well. So we know that there's at least 3 35s out there now.
Wow.
No, he sent me the photo.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he sent me the photo of it. It was
Perry was around for that.
If Perry was, I have no idea.
it was an old. I think it was an old Fitzgerald. It was a squat bottle, 35.
Wow.
So, and then that was these were the other bottles that I bought in the collection. One of them's an old Hennessy back in the 40s or something like that, and a pepper. But the president of Hennessy was in the other night from France. He was in, and I had this Hennessy and I had this little tiny Hennessy from the turn of the century, like a little half pint. And we put him up on display, obviously for the dinner. He was hosting a dinner at Jack, and he saw it. And he's like, "Can I see that?" And he pulled it over, and he's like laughing. He's like, to his lackey, he's like, "Take photos." He goes, and it's like a really thick French accent. He goes, "I have 3.5 miles of archive." And he goes, "I've never seen this."
Wow.
So he took a photo of it to have this guy do research and see why they don't have a bottle of it, I guess. So maybe I can swap it for a trip to
Yeah.
to France.
Yeah. You know?
Hey.
Yeah.
okay.
I would have
worth
no
it.
problem. So that 35 Stitzel I showed you, that guy bought it. He's like a 4th generation electrician in the Washington D.C. area, and his father and his partner used to give away those bottles and the James E. Peppers as Christmas gifts to all their clients and stuff like that. So they had cases and cases of this stuff. And when his dad had already passed away, but when his business partner passed away, he bought the contents of the guy's house and his car, and just bought the whole house. So all this whiskey. So he called an auctioneer. This is the late 70s. He called an auctioneer and said, "I got all this whiskey. Would you be interested in auctioning it off?" And it was the 35 cent. And they go, "Nah, it's only worth exactly what whatever they bought it off the shelf at, because it was the 70s. Nobody gave a shit about
Right.
it. So he took it to the dump.
Oh
he kept one of each one for his back bar, just for display, and took all those whiskeys to the dump.
I guarantee that 95% of the people, especially the older, like my
Yeah.
parents' age and stuff like that, whose parents have
Right.
died, they would not have any clue that people.
One of my
would drink
friends'
that
grandparents just passed
You know?
away, and they went through and they had a gold vein wax.
Oh, get outta here.
Yeah, and like some William Wellers and all this, and like he just like, "You want this?" And he's like, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, that's what I keep saying. Like, when people keep thinking like prohibition is rare, every time there's, especially right now with people getting that much older in this area from that time period, there's so much of that stuff that's coming, and more importantly, it's not going to the dump now because there's so much information out there about buying whiskey
Yeah.
that it's surfacing very
Right.
quickly right now because people think they can make a bunch of money on it, or at least like, the thing is they think they can get like $100 a bottle, and that's enough to get them interested in seeing
Right.
what's in the basement,
sure.
and then
It's
they
not
realize that it's worth $1,000 a bottle.
Right.
It's insane.
I was about to say, it's not you posting all those. I get pinged on Craigslist things that every time is like, we want to buy your old whiskey.
Yeah.
Like, it's not you guys doing all that, is it?
We've never posted
little low key on that.
You know what? We also don't do. I deal with mostly like private people because I'm not on any of the Facebook pages or anything like that because I'm afraid that it'll give Jack Rose a bad.
That's smart.
You know,
That's smart.
like even that Stitzel. I guess it was on another. He had posted that bottle, that 35 is on another website on I can't remember Drinks Planet, and he got lowballed by a ton of people. They wanted to give him like $300, and he had made a tentative deal with the guy, and the guy was going to PayPal him the money, and he's like, okay, but when your guy comes to pick it up, I want a picture of me with a sign that says all whiskey was good. He didn't want to. He was afraid, and the guy dropped the ball. He was going to sell all those bottles, the pepper and all that, for $1,000. And he called me and he goes, "What would you give me for this?" And I was like, "What were you offering?" He's like, $1,000 for all of them. I was like, "I'll give you at least $3,500 for the one bottle." So we ended up settling at $6,000 for like 4 bottles and a bunch of miscellaneous crap.
But you know,
That's
I
nice
think
of
that
you.
builds your reputation. That's how you get those connections.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you might, win one bottle here and there, but you're never gonna.
Yeah.
You build a reputation.
And we need. I mean, I hate to say it, we just need access
Yeah.
to product. All the time. I mean, it's tough. It's good. That means people are drinking whiskey though.
I was like, I don't think our listeners are going to help you get access to it.
I know.
Because they'll probly want to keep it for themselves, but
I hear
it's
ya. That's why I said
you
trade.
never know.
That's why I said I'm willing to trade.
There you go.
Maybe that'll open up an avenue, but we'll see.
It's funny though. People do call, like they'll just email the restaurant. And they're like, "I'm trying to get in touch with Bill Thomas." Like they find like the Washington Post article about like the hunting for stuff, and then they're like, "Oh, this guy buys whiskey," and then they.
Yeah, that bottle. I was also in a bidding war with somebody in California on that Stitzel. I got to his house. I didn't know I was bidding against anybody. I got to the house, and he's like, "Well, I got to give this guy in California a last." After he went because I didn't know him, but he knew who I was, and he wanted to hear my bid before.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, I was sitting there. I was like, well, I just took a seat. And I was like, well, I'll just wait till you reach him because I guarantee I'll be the high bidder.
Yeah.
Regardless, because I really wanted that bottle. And we sat there, and it was like I got there first thing in the morning. He called me that night. I was there at 10 a.m. the next morning, and it was 7 a.m. California time. So he kept trying to call the guy, and he's like, would normally answered, and he never answered. He goes, I'll tell you what. I sat there and I was just in his living room waiting for the guy to call, and he's like, I'll give him 15 more minutes if he doesn't call.
I'll just sell it to you.
I'll sell it to you. And I was like, you name the price, So he's the one that threw out the $6,000. I was like, done. But I only had $5,200 on me in cash, and I was just like, I tell you what. He goes, it's $6,000 plus I get to come down and have a drink in your restaurant. And I said, how about $6,000 and you bring your family down and we'll treat him to dinner and everything. And that's what he did. He picked up the, and I got it. He goes, do you want me to? He goes, hey, do you want bubble wrap? We'll wrap all these bottles. I was like, no, just give me a box. I want to get out of here. I threw him in a box. I was like literally out the door.
I don't want this guy to call.
I was like, please don't call. Please don't call.
That's awesome.
Now, what's the rules with so you said on the podcast I was listening to
Yeah, you were here.
other cities.
We're just going to move this away now.
Other places with bars, they can't just buy and then sell.
No,
Most of
only
the bars
in
that
DC.
are doing it are doing it.
Just DC. I mean, other DC bars can. I just don't think they do it at the scale that you all do,
Yeah.
right?
I remember Mike Miller. Okay.
California had some looser laws.
Looser
I
laws.
mean,
Washington.
because
North
every
Carolina
like I know
just-
Prov buys a bunch of stuff and sells them in his store and stuff like that too. So
Yeah, in fact, Prov, the first barrel when I was buying Velvet Glove and Iron Fist, back in the day, Prov and I were doing a lot. I was buying all of his BTACs, and even way back in the day, back in the early 2000s, Prov would call me like, hey, I just got in my allocation. Nobody wanted them back then. You want them? I was like, yeah. I was buying all of his Pappies, all of his BTACs. And when I came up with the barrel thing, I got back from DC after meeting with Drew. I was like, hey, man, I'm going to buy these barrels. Do you think you might want to buy some of them from me?
he's like, wait a second.
Yeah, it's funny now. Prov was the first guy that I talked to about buying any, because I was like, I can't take a whole barrel of whiskey. Now I bought 3.
Yeah.
I had to go hustle. So I went to Prov. He was the first guy I called and said, hey, would you buy some Willetts from me? So it's crazy to think back to that.
Oh, no.
You know?
Awesome.
So, yeah, Prov's been a good guy over the years. And then he got into it. Then he got into the full force.
Yeah.
You know? Those Facebook pages just launched a whole nother world. in
Well,
whiskey.
you could look at it one thing. You could say Facebook helped it or it ruined bourbon, right? It's one or the other.
It is.
So
It's pretty painful. And the problem is, because I stay off of those pages, Jared, I have Jared now. He has to. He gives me
a
updates.
go between.
He gives me updates.
Yeah.
Like what's popping. Like I'm like, tell me anything anytime anything takes a big price jump. Because I got to be out there buying, and I need to know am I being competitive or not.
Right now, Booker's 25th is going through the roof.
Isn't it though? It's crazy. I mean, I think it's good whiskey. Don't get me wrong.
I think it's up to 550, 600 now a bottle. I think last year it was 350. So
it's insane.
So yeah, that's one to keep your eye out on.
It's
everything.
Even like 107, Weller 107. So.
I just bought 18 Weller 107 paper labels 2 days ago at $2.50 a bottle. I was like happy with that because that means we only have $10 into it an ounce, so it keeps us pretty stashed with that for a while.
Crazy connections you got.
This guy I've known for years. A guy who when he used to pick barrels with Drew too, and I would clear him through the distribution company for him. Then he called me. He's been selling his whole collection. So except for his 1789 stuff, 1789B, those guys.
Oh, the
group, the barrel group.
Oh, okay.
That's a lot of those guys. A lot of guys in that.
I've seen an old Scout with 1789B on it.
There's a lot of the guys that start that were the old school guys, the guys that were even 15, 20 years older than me, and have been buying for years, and now they're cashing out of everything but 1789 stuff. Because they have plenty of 1789 to drink now, so they're
right. So they're done,
and it's a good market for them. They're like, I've done deals as high as, $100,000, buying up stuff. Her and I did a great deal in Indiana, 59,000, and the shit that was in that.
Drove it all back in a U-Haul. I did.
Yeah. First of all, we didn't drive it.
You're like, whoa, no
we went Indiana, back to Kentucky. We were hunting, and then into Missouri. Then looped around through Ohio, came around in a U-Haul, just loading the truck.
Oh, God.
We like American Pickers.
Just stopping at random places?
Just stopping. Well, hitting people I knew along the way. So
okay.
Just hitting.
You're just hitting up like liquor stores.
Literally just like American
In Missouri,
Pickers.
we were going in Missouri because we had never been there. We were going liquor store on the U-Haul.
Wasn't that when all the Bookers?
And Booker's, Booker's 25th had just come out, so it was just like Booker's.
So we picked. It was like that day, like we had just gotten. Yeah.
I remember when Four Roses 120th came out, because the 40th came out kind of, nobody really knew when it came out. It just kind of came and went. So I was like, shit, the next time they do a special release, I'm going to be right on it. And I called Guthrie and I said, hey, man, has 120th hit your store yet? And he goes, it just came in today. And I said, okay, I'll see you in the morning. And I flew in, bought, and went to I ended up with like 15, 16 cases. I went every liquor barn, everything, just hit them all.
Yeah.
Took every bottle I could get. And we're still using that today. That's probably the biggest buy I've ever done.
The 120s?
The 120s.
Yeah.
I ended up with like 70 bottles or something crazy.
Damn.
Just hunting. Because back then they were just sitting there too.
So if you think you have a bunker, you don't really have a bunker until you go to Jack Rose.
My problem is I drink it all as soon as I get it.
I was saying when I was camping out for Parker's Heritage, I was the first person to ever buy Parker's Heritage. And I mean, I was there when they pulled the barrel samples. And they had them, and I tried to write and I was like, what is this going to be? They're like, well, we've got a name for it, but we don't have any bottling. And I was like, I'll take 4 cases. And they were like, yeah, but we don't.
You're talking about the 27-year like PhD one?
No.
This year's.
The PhD one was released 2. The very first, there was the Parker's one was just bourbon, and there was like 4 different proofs.
Okay.
And
What was it called?
It was just Parker's Heritage. It wasn't the cognac. It wasn't the 27th the golden anniversary. Those are the first, and Parker's wheat. It was the very first one, so it was just called Parker's Heritage, no finish. And Lynn, who ran the gift shop or ran the Heritage Center, she said, "Okay, you know what I'll do? I'll just charge you for them now. We know what we're going to charge for them, and I'll drive them to you when I come up to see my family in Annapolis for Thanksgiving." And then she called me. She's like, "I can't make it. I'm not coming up for Thanksgiving." I was like, shit, I was going to be the first person to ever have it. Now I'm going to be... So I had to buy it from the distributor. So I bought like 4 cases from the distributor because you could actually do that back then. Mm-hmm. And then like months later, she drove me up. So I still have 4 cases of Parker's One.
Wow.
From just because of that stupid mistake of her not making it.
Right.
You know?
It is the best
Lucky.
mistake.
Best mistake ever. Because if not, I would have never ordered it from the distributor.
Right.
So that was the luckiest.